My first instinct when I see these kinds of conflicts is to say, like, wow, RFK really has them on the ropes. They do not like this guy's perspective.
I mean, this is them really starting to launch into the Trump treatment of RFK. So for a while they were saying he's a quack, he's spreading misinformation, he's a huckster, he's trying to sell snake oil and fool people about the medical science for his own personal gain. The typical kind of stuff you hear about anyone who gets labeled a conspiracy theorist by the establishment. But now they're actually moving into this guy's racist territory, right? They're openly referring to him as an anti-Semite simply because he said he wanted to have a discussion about the degree to which COVID seems to have affected different populations. Now, of course, the left was very comfortable having the conversation about the effects COVID had on different populations, again, in 2020, in 2021, when they claimed it was disproportionately affecting the African-American community, the Black community.
If there's anyone who can recognize anti-Semitism, it should be the people on the Democrat side, because they are really anti-Semitic in a lot of cases. Pramila Jayapal came out the other day and was saying that Israel is a racist state. You have Ilhan Omar, who is decidedly anti-Semitic. It seems to be, in a lot of cases, what the Democrats accuse other people of doing is the thing that they are doing themselves.
All the time. All the time. And there's another element to this, which is really important that I want to flag. They're using this term bioweapon, right? They're saying he's a conspiracy theorist. He's saying COVID is a bioweapon. And this is a term that people will generally associate with conspiracy theory. And because it's so bombastic, it sounds frightening. But according to Sir Francis Boyle, the American author of the American implementing legislation of the International Bioweapons Convention, anything created through gain-of-function research is a bioweapon. This is the legal definition. So if it's created through gain-of-function research, which many of these institutions are now acknowledging, given that they're saying lab leak hypothesis is more than likely, then it is a bioweapon. That's not a controversial claim. That's literally what the law says. That's literally what the man who wrote the law has said about it. And what the left has done is, guess what? Labeled him a conspiracy theorist, even though he's literally the person who was responsible for implementing that legislation and writing around it. And they're saying he's a lawyer, not an epidemiologist. How can he be saying it's a biological weapon? Well, because whether something's a biological weapon is not a question of epidemiology, it's a question of law, and he literally wrote the thing.
This is something that's bothering me right now. So I'm looking at the New York Times article titled "Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Airs Bigoted New COVID Conspiracy Theory About Jews and Chinese." Is that the article in question? I haven't read the article yet.
No, it's a New York Post article.
A New York Post. Okay. All these, it looks like these other outlets are picking up the claim. It's like
Everybody
a game of telephone.
And to be fair,
and you could see it all over Twitter too. Everyone starts coming out saying that RFK is racist and anti-Semitic and hateful and all of these kinds of things. It really was this classic snowball effect where you have, one headline drove everything. A lot of the people who are talking about this story, I wonder if they even read the article or watched the interview or just ran with the headline.
I'm looking at The Guardian now. White House condemned. The White House is now chiming in on it. So it's not just news organizations.
His sister condemned this statement. But this is the thing that's interesting about RFK's role in his own family. From the get-go, he was the media's favorite new conspiracy theorist, right? The day that he announced, that was one of the first things that came out. He questions vaccines. He's a conspiracy theorist. And, regardless of the fact that you don't necessarily have to take medical advice from a politician, I understand that. It is interesting that this was the brand they were going to use to hurt his campaign from the beginning, and now they're just sort of going back and trying to find more evidence of this. And that's why I think it's an important conversation to have. Was this quote accurately represented in the article? Is he referring to a study? Is he himself promoting false information? Because if you don't know that, it's easy to then to assume he is in fact this deranged person, right?
Also, how quickly we forget everything. We forget the beginning of COVID. We forget all of these conspiracy theories that, as they were called, about the lab leak and everything else that have proven out.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
No, that have proven to be true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, but there's another element to this too. There's a couple things I want to mention here. Firstly, this strikes me as RFK having his Jewish space lasers moment. So for those who don't know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is constantly slandered as having said there are these Jewish space lasers. It's total nonsense.
It's not what
Before she was ever elected to office, she made a very long Facebook post where she was saying things which, by the way, I'm not defending, I don't agree with, but she was basically saying that she thought that forest fires were started by, or potentially started, she basically floated the question they may have been started by a satellite, which was funded by organizations that people claim it is anti-Semitic to criticize. It's basically the equivalent of saying, oh, if you say something negative about George Soros, you're an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist. Marjorie Taylor Greene never, ever, ever said the Jewish space lasers thing. It's complete nonsense. Even left-wing fact checkers have said that that's not exactly true. They've given it a mixed factuality rating, which is ridiculous because it is totally false. But when you read their rationale, they say, well, no, she never said there were Jewish space lasers. She just said that this space satellite that was funded by groups that anti-Semites don't like might have started the fire. So I guess my point is this is another example of the media and the left-wing establishment seeing somebody as a threat and wanting to take everything they're saying totally out of context. And I got to be honest, I've mentioned that I think RFK has problems. There's a lot I don't agree with him on. Obviously, I'm a conservative, so I'm not going to agree with him on quite a lot. But I felt similarly about Trump. I'm not saying I'll ever support RFK. I could never support a pro-choice candidate. But I remember when Trump first came out of the scene, I remember thinking, I'm not a huge fan of this guy. And then I saw who his enemies were and what they were saying about him and how they were smearing him. And I began to warm up to him.